this is the fun part of the video. We are going to be adding mixed media. Right now, I am going to be laying my cards out. So I'm just kind of re-looking through them. This is the part of the process that I think it takes. You can either do it really fast or do it slow. I think that this is just how your own brain works. And I'm trying to get an idea of what ones I think will look good with what kind of media as I'm looking them through. So if you take the time to do that now, then when you go to get your media, you can just kind of make these pretty fast. It took me about an hour or so to do most of this. So keep that in mind, that by doing it in a big batch like this, it will take a little bit of time, and it takes more time for it to dry as well. But if you do this part first, then it gets done, and then you just let it sit overnight. This is a good thing to do in the evening, and then you just let it sit overnight, and by the next day it should be, most of it should be dry. There might be one or two elements, if you follow all of my pages, that took a little bit longer, and you'll see what cards, because I'll definitely make sure. So you're seeing some of those piles. Those are just the piles of cards that I think I might want to use bits and pieces. So let's talk about what I'm using. I am going to be adding gesso and some other paints and stuff. I do different stuff on different cards, and I'm just kind of looking at the patterns and seeing how much of these patterns do I want to show. So this is just plain, it's like a white gesso. And then this is the clear gesso. And so some of the cards will, when it dries, it will be mostly clear. It is like a matte. It's not shiny gesso. And it does, you still can see it. So even if it says it's clear, just know that it's not going to show completely. And so I think about covering it up. I'm not going to even end up using that card because I just don't really care how it turned out. I should have just left it and maybe used it for something else, or used it just the way that it was, because it's really pretty. It has that wood grain, but sometimes when you add media to a wood grain pattern, it looks really cool because you have already texture on there. So here is some white gesso that's Liquitex. I will make sure I have a list of the types of gesso that I use, so that you can, if you don't have them, you can locate if you want them. You don't need this. You could even just take acrylic white paint and add it to it would make it a lot easier, but I thought it would be kind of cool to have a few different types. So this is the cut file that we used, right? Or that we have for the class. I already cut this out just like I cut out other stuff. So these are, what you're seeing me do is add water to the pots. These are shimmers. You can use any kind of paint that you want to use. So don't think that because I'm using shimmers, you need to go out and buy shimmers. There are some shimmers type items in the Click Kit store. I'll have a link to where we have them. I'm not sure how much we have. I know we don't have a ton of different types of paints. We do have some, and you could use any kind of watercolor. This is like a watercolor. These pots are like watercolors. And then the other pots that I'll use up at the top are more like a really thin acrylic paint, if that makes sense. So it's pretty translucent. Sorry for the banging. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to use this as a stencil. This is a good way to make use of any cut file that you have. You can do this with any kind of cut file, and you can use paper. You don't have to cut it with like a plasticky type of, I wouldn't use like vellum to do a cut file and try to use it. But so I'm going to take some texture paste that is already, this is a Shimmers product, but you could use any kind of texture paste. And I use one that was already colored, right? So I don't have to do any mixing. So I'm picking colors that really match. So this is a gray color, and it's gonna look good, right? Because it's going to match the colors. And whenever you use a stencil, you might as well get a good use out of it. So use it a couple times. So I'm also going to put it on here. And this is why I cut out multiple pieces of the same paper, because then I can just build up some things, and you're going to have, if you do all the cards that I did, you will have extra. So I wanted to show you that you can also make use of all this mess that you have on your stencil and just put it on a piece of white paper and press down. Now, if you press down really hard, you will probably smudge it a little bit more. I just wanted you to see a little bit of the lines. I'm not going to even end up using this card, but this is a really fun way to have a little bit of something that is really simple, and you could just play off of that card and use it in your album, especially if you like more of a clean and white look. All of these techniques that I am doing are really simple, because here's the thing. You're making a big album, or you're making an album, so you want this part to not be super complicated, but you want it to make your album look different than everybody else. So here's a technique that I absolutely love. It's called taking a it's a spray technique, and using this as a mask. So the stencil is over top, and I'm just going to take some spray, and you can use any kind of liquid spray, and then you lift it up, and you got to be really careful, because depending on how intricate the doily is, it will kind of like get underneath the doily. So I'm being really super careful so I don't mess up that pattern, and I'm just going to let it sit and dry, and then I'm going to use that card to build a cluster on later. Super fun, right? So here's another stenciling technique. I'm taking out a different texture paste, or and these are going to dry shiny, so they're not matte. And I'm just putting a few things. I'm thinking about the fact that I am going to be building stuff on here, so I really don't need to fill the whole card up. I mean, you definitely could. You could just put the stencil on and do the whole thing with leaves. That would look cool too. Remember that when you're putting the texture paste on the corrugated paper, it's going to get in the lines, and you're going to need a lot more than it. Like, you're going to see, I'm going to put a couple of leaves on here. I thought, hey, this might look cool. And this is one of those times where I've tried something and I didn't like it, which is partly why I didn't use this card in the end, because I just didn't like how it turned out. I just think it really would have just looked better if I had just kept it. Even if I had just kept it with that clear. So as you see, the clear mostly dried, but it's not all the way dry. So you will see the texture, the whatever you use for a gesso. And I probably didn't even need to use gesso. I find that a lot of times these papers, they curl no matter what. So a little bit of texture paste. So this is a little bit more complicated. I'm taking this and I'm going to put blobs of the texture paste, and I'm using different kinds. So that first one was just the texture paste that was already colored. And now I'm going to color this one. So I'm taking just plain modeling paste. I like to use more of a whipped kind, but it really doesn't matter. And now I'm spraying some spray in. And this is like supposed to be a navy color, but as you can see, as I add it to the white, because it's a light color, it looks more purple, and it's way lighter than I want it to be. I want it to be darker. It's not really the purple that is in the collection. So I'm trying to get it more of that blue color. So I'm playing around, but here's the thing you got to remember. When you're spraying sprays into this, it's gonna make it a lot more liquidy. So you got to be careful. And so you almost want to think about the color. And as you can see, it's even more purple. So I'm trying to figure out how I want to do this. And it's just a play of, so I add a spray of gray, and I add another spray of the navy, and one more of that other blue. So I'll have a list of the different colors that I use so that you can see them. and it looks a lot better. And when it dries, it is a lot lighter, but it's much closer to the colors that are in the collection. So I have this, I might as well use more. So here's another stencil. These little stencils are really awesome because they're meant for tags, these Tim Holtz ones. And this looks more like a cobblestone. I wanted something natural. So this is one of the tips that I will mention when you're thinking about the stencils. One, just pick a few. As you see, I'm using basically like 3 stencils I think I used for all of these. And I'm thinking about the texture that it's going to give. What is the pattern? And the simple, the better. So I added a gold texture paste. This is already gold. And I clumped it on again. So there will be, like I said, close-ups in the class group, so you can see all these pages that I did. So you can copy them if you would like, or do something similar. So here I'm taking a stencil. Okay, so I used 4 stencils if you count this one. And I tried to use organic looking stencils, so stencils that look like something that you would see outside. These kind of look a little bit like vines or leaf type pattern. It really is like a herringbone, but like different. So I'm using this paintbrush. You could also use like a foam, like a dauber, and just put your acrylic paint on like that. Just 2 corners. Like I said, I really try to think about the fact that not all of this is going to be showing. So I just want to do a couple of areas. And I tend to do like diagonal corners, thinking about, if I'm going to build a cluster, either I might build it towards the middle or off to one side, and I want to keep it fairly simple. So here I'm just spreading this orange, and I'm using colors that are similar to what's in the collection. So this is thinned down acrylic paint, and it's like a navy black. So I just splurted it. It's in the drop thingy. I have it in a fine line bottle, but the fine line part is clogged up. Things you don't think about. So here's a tag that I'm just spraying on. I want it to look kind of like marbling. So I'm taking different color grays and I'm just kind of playing with it. And you want to move it around. And I thought maybe if I use my piece, piecer, and I kind of swirl it, the paint will go in that area and just kind of make it look a little bit more like a marbling look. It sort of worked. I really liked how this tag turned out. This kind of thing, when you just spray things on and move it around, you kind of just get what you get. So you do want to be careful how much you mix it, because the colors will mix together. And as you can see, I'm going to add some more color. And if you have too much liquid, you can just use a paper towel and just kind of daub it like really carefully, because otherwise you'll take more of the media off than you want. So I'm just going to add some drops. This is the navy color. So I used some gray. Now I'm going to add some navy, and I'm going to twirl it around a little bit again. I'm trying to have it so it doesn't cover the whole tag. And this tag will be a little bit warped. So all of these pages warp because we have media on them. I find that just adding gesso, you will get a warping. If you really don't like it, after it's dry, just put it on like your desk and lay like layouts, books on them. And if you let them sit overnight or so, with something on it that's heavy, that usually helps a lot. I mean, so here's the thing is with some of the media, you probably don't want to do that. I've just learned to let it be wonky, because that's just how it is. You can always glue 2 pieces together, and that kind of helps a little bit. So this, I'm adding some more of the paint to just different parts of it, and I'm cleaning my brush off. And so this is really just a playtime. So you just add some different blocks of color. And then here I'm just taking my paintbrush and tapping it so I get like little splatters. That is real. It's a gray, but it's kind of like a silvery gray. So you know, you barely see it, but it adds just a little bit of something. And the thing that I like to use, the reason why I like to use this paint as opposed to maybe some other acrylic paints, and you could use any kind of acrylic paint or any kind of watercolor, is that I like how these, when they dry, they're a little raised, so you get a little bit of texture. So this has some gesso on it, right? Which is why it's white. And I'm going to try to mimic that triangle diamond pattern. It's not really a triangle, it's a diamond. So I'm kind of following along in the inside, and I don't want it to be perfect. So I won't, you know, I want it to look like I painted it. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to push it off to the side for a minute, I believe. I do add some splatters to it, so I know I had a hard time because um it it didn't look perfect. And this is one of those things that mixed media never looks perfect. So if you don't like it, you can always redo it. Or you can just decide to live with it being how it turns out. So this is where just playing with all these different cards, if you make a whole bunch and you don't end up liking a couple of them, then you have extra. So here is the splatter part. I thought that this would really help bring out those blue colors, the contrast. So this is the thing that you're thinking about, right? When you're putting the media on, what colors do they match together? Are they contrasting? So these are things that I keep in the back of my mind when I do it. It's just automatically I'm thinking about it. It's not something that I really have to like pull out of my brain, but I think people who don't do a lot of mixed media, or some people just have a harder time with it, right? So figure out what kind of person you are and do it based on that. So this is a copper color paint. And like I said, these ones off to the side are more like a watercolor, but they still dry kind of raised, and they're very metallic-y. So I want a card that has like almost like leaves. So I want it to remind me of leaves. So I'm going to do different colors on there. This one, I'm just taking some of that paint that I still have on my paintbrush, because that copper is really like a little bit on your paintbrush goes a long way. So I'm trying to make use of what I had on my paintbrush before I get rid of it, because once you dump, you dunk your paintbrush in the water to clean it off, the paint is gone. And so here I'm going to do some more splatters on here. It looks really cool with the oranges and then that copper. And actually that color right there is like a burgundy type of color. So it has a little bit of red, and it really actually matches the red that's in the collection really well. So, and like I said, I like to do swipes of paint, or like I have a blob of paint and then I'm going to add another little area of blobs. It's really not very technical what I'm doing. It's just matching colors, and then you also want to think about, like, when this dries, what is the texture going to be like? Like, is it going to be raised? Is it going to be flat? And just kind of think about that. Like I said, this card, I want it to kind of look like leaves. So this is one thing that I do kind of think about, but I guess I don't overly think about, is what is this card going? What do I want it to look like? Do I want it to be inspired by something I've seen, or something that I know I have in my album? I know I'm going to have pictures of fall leaves, because that's part of the things that I love about fall. So I want my cards to kind of have that thought process in mind. I mean, I'm not saying, oh, I'm making this card just for this, because I don't, at this point, I have no idea where in my album these are going to go. And actually, I don't really know until I put the whole thing together exactly where everything is going to go together, until I start building it, right? So here's some more just blocks of paint. And really that's kind of how I do it. And I like it when the paint overlaps and when it's dry, as opposed to adding the paint when it's kind of wet, and how it mixes. These are things that you do want to think about, right? You want to think about, if you're putting wet paint on wet paint, and will the colors mix together, because you don't want them to get muddy. And so this is why I'm kind of letting these cards sit, especially the dropped one, because I don't want the splatters to all mix in together. Like if you do too many splatters without letting it dry for a few minutes at least, you will end up having the drops mixed together, which could be okay, but do you want them to be, you don't want them to look muddled, right? You want them to be separate. And as you can see, I am putting my paintbrush a little bit down to the paper if I see an area where I think I might want that color. So I'm using a few different colors. They're autumn colors, so they're like an orangey color. There's like a brown type of color and the copper color. And so that card turned out so amazing. There's a gray color, like a blue-gray color too. It's like a flannelly blue. This one, it's hard to see, but I just took that white gray color and I'm just doing splatters on it. It looks really awesome. Like this is another one of those contrasting moments where you see that dark or that navy, and then you see just a few little splatters, and a few splatters go a long way. If you want really big splatter drops, take your paintbrush and add a lot of media to it because you want it to be liquidy, and hang it up from the top. Just be really patient and let it drop, and then that's where you get that splattering look. So, but you got to put it up above. So definitely if you're someone who is really messy, think about that. That's why I use a mat, because I don't want to get my desk all gross. I take this off usually when I start building pages, but so think about that. And think about the cards around you too if you're messy. So I can keep a few cards together, but I have messed things up because I've had them too close together. I know it sounds really simple, and I know I made this sound really simple. If you have any questions, be sure to ask me in the group, and I will answer. And I can, if you need me to kind of explain it more in words, let me know, and I'll just write up a little snippet of kind of what I did. But there's all these close-ups and cards in the group as well, so be sure to check that out.